The USS Valiant drifted alone in the darkness of space. It was a small ship, old and damaged from many battles. Burn marks covered its hull. One of its engines was barely working, but it still flew, and that was enough. Commander Daniel Harris stood on the bridge of his ship. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been fighting for 3 months without rest. His uniform was wrinkled, and he had not shaved in days. But his hands were steady, and his mind was clear. Around him, his crew worked in silence. They knew this situation was bad. The main human fleet had been destroyed 2 weeks ago near Jupiter. The colonies on Mars and Europa had fallen. Earth itself was under threat. And here they were, one small ship against an entire alien armada. "Sir," said Lieutenant Katie Morrison from her station. She was young, barely 25, with short brown hair and sharp eyes. "We are receiving a transmission from the Zarth flagship." Daniel took a deep breath. "Put it on screen." The view screen flickered to life. The image that appeared made several crew members step back in fear. It was Vexor Koth, Supreme General of the Zorth Dominion. The Zorth were terrifying creatures. They stood 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin like gray stone. Their heads were covered in bony plates, and their eyes glowed a deep red. Vexor was the largest of them all, covered in battle scars and wearing armor made from the bones of his enemies. "Human commander," Vexor said. His voice was deep and cold, like stones grinding together. "I am Vexor Koth. I have conquered 17 species across this galaxy. I have burned 100 worlds. And now I have come for yours." Daniel said nothing. He simply watched and waited. Vexar continued. "Your fleet is gone. Your colonies have fallen. You stand alone in a broken ship, facing the greatest military force this galaxy has ever seen." The alien general leaned forward, his red eyes burning bright. "I command 1,000,000 soldiers. Each one has been bred for war since birth. Each one has killed more enemies than you have crew members on your little ship. Still, Daniel remained silent. "Surrender now," Vexor demanded. "Kneel before the Dominion, and I may grant your species a quick death. Resist, and I will make your extinction last 1,000 years. I will burn every city. I will poison every ocean. I will hunt down every last human until your kind is nothing but a bad memory." The bridge was completely quiet. Every crew member held their breath, waiting for their commander to respond. Daniel Harris stood up slowly from his chair. He walked toward the view screen until he was face to face with the alien general's image. Then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled. "1,000,000 soldiers," Daniel said calmly. "That is impressive. Truly impressive." Vexor's eyes narrowed. He had expected fear. He had expected begging. This calm confidence confused him. "But here's the thing, General," Daniel continued. "I have been fighting wars my entire life. I fought in the African conflicts. I fought in the Lunar Rebellion. I commanded ships against pirates in the asteroid belt. And in all that time, I learned one important lesson." He paused, letting the silence build. "Numbers do not win wars. Ideas do." Vexor laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. "Ideas? You think ideas will stop my armies?" "I know they will," Daniel replied. "You have 1,000,000 soldiers? Perfect. I have 1,000,000 ways to stop them." The alien general's laughter died. For just a moment, something flickered in those red eyes. It might have been doubt. It might have been anger. Daniel could not tell. "You are a fool," Vexor snarled. "In 3 days, my fleet will reach Earth. In 3 weeks, your species will be extinct. Enjoy your final hours, human." They will be filled with regret. The transmission ended. The screen went dark. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Ryan Peters, the chief engineer, broke the silence. He was a big man with rough hands and a thick beard. The kind of person who could fix anything with enough time and spare parts. "Sir," Ryan said carefully, "that was either the bravest thing I have ever seen, or the craziest." Daniel turned to face his crew. He looked at each of them in turn. Katie at Communications, Ryan at Engineering, Dr. Lisa Martinez at the Medical Station, Lieutenant Derek Liu at Weapons, Navigator Amy Lawson at the helm. These people had followed him through impossible odds before. They would do it again. "It was both," Daniel admitted. "But I meant every word." He walked back to his chair, but did not sit down. Instead, he pulled up a holographic display showing the entire solar system. Red dots marked the positions of Zorath ships. There were hundreds of them, slowly moving toward Earth like a wave of death. "The Zorath have conquered 17 species," Daniel said. "Do you know why they always win?" Nobody answered. Because every species they fought tried to match them. Army against army. Fleet against fleet. They played the Zorath game, and they lost. Daniel pointed at the red dots on the display. "We are not going to do that." Amy Lawson leaned forward in her seat. She was a small woman with fierce eyes and a reputation for flying through situations that should have killed her. "What are we going to do instead?" Daniel smiled again. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had already accepted that he might die and decided to make his death mean something. "We are going to cheat," he said. "We are going to lie. We are going to fight dirty. We are going to use every trick, every trap, every underhanded tactic that humans have invented in 10,000 years of killing each other." He pulled up another display, this one showing faces. Hundreds of faces. Men and women from every country on Earth. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, spies, criminals, geniuses. "I have been making calls," Daniel explained, "to old friends, to enemies who hate the Zorath more than they hate me, to people who have spent their entire lives preparing for a war that everyone else said would never come." Ryan studied the faces on the display. His eyes went wide when he recognized some of them. "Sir, half of these people are wanted criminals. That woman there blew up a government building. That man sold weapons to terrorists." "Yes," Daniel agreed. "They did terrible things. But they also know how to fight wars that cannot be won through normal means. And right now, we need every advantage we can get." Katie Morrison stood up from her station. Her face was pale but determined. "What do you need from us, Commander?" Daniel looked at his crew one final time. These were good people. Brave people. They deserved better than this. But this was the hand they had been dealt, and they would play it. "I need you to be human," he said simply. "Creative, stubborn, unpredictable. The Zorath have studied our military. They know our ships, our weapons, our standard tactics. But they do not understand what makes us truly dangerous." He sat down in his chair and gripped the armrests. "It is time to teach them." 3 days passed faster than anyone expected. While the Zorath fleet moved closer to Earth, humanity began to organize in ways the aliens could never have predicted. On the occupied colony of Haven Prime, a woman named Katie Morrison crouched in an underground bunker. Above her head, Zorath soldiers patrolled the streets of New Seattle. They believed the city was under control. They believed the humans had given up. They were very wrong. Katie had been a school teacher before the invasion. She had never fired a gun in her life. But when the Zorath killed her husband during the first attack, something inside her changed. Now she led a resistance group of over 200 people, all of them ordinary citizens who had decided to fight back. "Status report," she said to the man beside her. Nathan Cole was a farmer who had lost his entire family. He was thin and quiet, with hands that still smelled like dirt, even after weeks underground. But those hands had learned to build bombs from farming chemicals. "We have 17 explosive devices ready," Nathan said. "Enough to take out their supply depot near the old stadium." Kay nodded. "And the communication network?" A young man named Derek Liu answered from his corner of the bunker. He sat in front of a dozen computer screens, his fingers dancing across keyboards. Before the war, Derek had been a hacker who stole money from corporations. Now he used those skills for a better purpose. "I am inside their communication system," Derek reported. "They have no idea we can read every message they send. I know where every patrol will be for the next 6 hours." Katie allowed herself a small smile. The Zorath were powerful, but they were also arrogant. They did not believe humans were smart enough to hack their systems. They did not believe civilians could become soldiers. These beliefs would cost them. "Tonight," Katie decided, "we hit the supply depot at midnight. Derek, I need you to create a distraction on the other side of the city. Make them think there is a bigger threat somewhere else." "Already working on it," Derek replied with a grin. Meanwhile, in space, the USS Valiant had gathered what remained of the human fleet. It was not much. 47 ships in total, most of them damaged. The largest was a carrier called the Victory, commanded by Captain Megan Powell. Megan was a tall woman with red hair and a scar across her left cheek. She had earned that scar fighting pirates near Saturn. Now she sat in the command center of her ship, staring at a holographic display of the Zorath fleet. 312 enemy ships, she said quietly, against 47 of ours. Commander Daniel Harris appeared on her view screen. He looked even more tired than before, but his eyes were still sharp. "Those numbers do not matter," Daniel said. "We are not going to fight them in open battle." "Then what are we going to do?" Daniel smiled. "Hit and run. Strike and vanish. We will be ghosts, Megan. We will hurt them in 1,000 small ways until they bleed to death." He explained the plan. The human fleet would split into small groups of 3 or 4 ships. Each group would target Zorath supply convoys, communication relays, and scout vessels. They would attack without warning, do as much damage as possible, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. "Death by 1,000 cuts," Megan said, understanding. Exactly. Exactly. The Zorath fight with overwhelming force. They crush enemies with pure numbers. But they do not know how to fight an enemy they cannot see. An enemy that refuses to stand still. Back on the Valiant, Ryan Peters was performing miracles in the engineering section. The ship had taken heavy damage in its last battle. By all normal standards, it should have been in a repair dock for 3 months. Ryan had 3 days. "This is impossible," said his assistant, Nicole Adams. She was young and brilliant, fresh out of the academy. She had graduated top of her class in engineering. Nothing in her education had prepared her for this. "Nothing is impossible," Ryan replied. He was covered in grease and had not slept in 2 days. "Just difficult." He pointed to a schematic on his screen. "We cannot match Zorath firepower with normal weapons, so we will not try. Instead, we are going to modify our missile systems." "Modify them how?" Ryan grinned like a child with a dangerous toy. "The Zorath have shields that can block our normal explosives. But I have been studying their technology. Their shields work by detecting energy signatures. Big explosions get blocked. Small ones get through." Nicole began to understand. "So instead of one big missile, we use hundreds of small ones." "Thousands," Ryan corrected. "I am converting our cargo bays into launch systems. Each one will hold 5,000 micro-missiles. They are too small for Zorath shields to detect. Once they get through, they will tear apart everything they touch." It was insane. It was dangerous. It went against every rule of military engineering. It might actually work. In the medical bay, Dr. Lisa Martinez was working on a different kind of weapon. She was a small woman with gentle hands and kind eyes. She had become a doctor to save lives. Now she was learning how to take them. The Zoroth have a weakness, she told Daniel when he visited her lab. Their biology is very different from ours. Things that are harmless to humans can be deadly to them. She showed him a vial of clear liquid. This is based on a common earth bacteria. To us, it causes nothing more than a mild cold. To the Zoroth, it causes complete paralysis within minutes. Daniel studied the vial. How long does the paralysis last? 6 to 8 hours. Long enough for our soldiers to capture them, restrain them, or simply walk past them. Can it be spread through the air? Lisa nodded. I have developed a gas version. 1 canister can cover an entire building. Every Zoroth inside will drop within 2 minutes. This was not the kind of warfare Daniel had trained for. He had been taught to fight with honor, to face enemies directly, to win through skill and courage. But honor had not saved the colonies. Courage had not stopped the Zoroth advance. Only results mattered now. Make as much as you can, Daniel ordered. Send the formula to every resistance group on every occupied world. That night, on Haven Prime, Katie Morrison led her team into the darkness. They moved through tunnels that Derek had found on old city maps. Above them, Zoroth patrols walked their routes, completely unaware of the death moving beneath their feet. At exactly midnight, explosions lit up the eastern side of the city. Derek's distraction worked perfectly. Every Zoroth soldier in the area rushed toward the fake threat. The supply depot had only a skeleton guard when Katie's team arrived. Nathan's bombs did their work efficiently. Within 10 minutes, 3 months' worth of Zoroth supplies were burning. As she watched the flames rise into the night sky, Katie felt something she had not felt since the invasion began. Hope. Across the solar system, similar scenes played out. Resistance groups struck on Mars, Europa, and a dozen other colonies. Human ships ambushed a Zoroth convoy near Jupiter, destroying 6 transport vessels before vanishing into the asteroid field. On his flagship, General Vexer received report after report of attacks. None of them caused serious damage to his forces. None of them changed the overall situation. In 3 days, his fleet would reach Earth. And nothing the humans did would stop that. But for the first time in his long career, Vexer felt something he did not recognize. It was a small feeling, barely noticeable. A tiny voice in the back of his mind that wondered if he had underestimated these strange creatures. He pushed the feeling aside. Humans were weak. Humans were inferior. His million soldiers would crush them like all the others. The voice remained. The Zoroth expected war. They received chaos. On the 2nd week of the occupation, a young man named Brandon Taylor discovered something important. He was a mechanic from a small town in Montana, drafted into the resistance after his home was destroyed. He had no military training. He had no special skills, but he had sharp eyes and a curious mind. During a supply raid, Brandon got close enough to a dead Zoroth soldier to study its armor. While other fighters collected weapons and food, he examined every part of the alien body covering. And he found it, a gap. A small opening beneath the 3rd arm joint where the armor plates did not quite connect. It was barely an inch wide, but it was enough. Brandon reported his discovery to the resistance network. Within 48 hours, every human fighter on 6 different worlds knew exactly where to aim. Zoroth casualty rates tripled overnight. General Vexer could not understand it. His soldiers were the best equipped in the galaxy. Their armor had protected them through 17 conquests. Now humans with simple projectile weapons were killing them with single shots. Find out how they are doing this, Vexer commanded his officers. Find out and stop it. But by the time the Zorath discovered the weakness and modified their armor, the humans had found 3 more. A chemical that dissolved their boot seals. A sound frequency that disrupted their communication implants. A light pattern that caused temporary blindness. This was human warfare. Constant adaptation. Endless creativity. The Zorath had spent centuries perfecting their combat techniques. Humans changed theirs every weak dot in space. Captain Megan Powell was proving that ships could be just as creative as soldiers. Her squadron of 12 fast attack vessels had been harassing Zorath supply lines for 10 days. They had destroyed 43 transport ships and damaged dozens more. But the enemy had learned. Now every convoy traveled with heavy escort. "We cannot break through their defensive formation," reported her tactical officer. "They've adapted to our attack patterns." Megan studied the holographic display. 20 Zorath warships surrounded a convoy of 50 transports. The warships were arranged in a perfect sphere, covering every angle of approach. It was textbook defensive tactics. That was the problem. Megan had read the same textbooks. "They expect us to attack the convoy," she said slowly. "So we will not attack the convoy, ma'am." Megan pointed at the display. "Those warships are using standard formation spacing. They are close enough to support each other, but far enough apart to cover maximum area. Very efficient. Very predictable." She tapped one of the warship icons. "This one is the command vessel. It coordinates the defensive pattern. If it loses communication with the others for even 30 seconds, the formation will break apart while they try to re-establish contact." Her crew understood immediately. They did not need to destroy the convoy. They just needed to create confusion. 12 hours later, the Zorath convoy was passing through an asteroid field when strange signals began flooding their communication systems. The signals were meaningless noise, but they came from hundreds of different sources hidden among the rocks. The command vessel tried to filter the interference. For 28 seconds, it lost contact with the other warships. In those 28 seconds, Megan's squadron struck. They did not aim for the transports. They aimed for the engines of 3 warships on the formation's edge. Crippled, those warships drifted out of position. The perfect sphere became an imperfect mess by the time the Zorath reorganized. 11 transports had been destroyed, and Megan's ships had vanished. Back into the asteroid field, on the surface of Haven Prime, the resistance had grown bold. What started as scattered attacks had become an organized campaign. Katie Morrison no longer led 200 fighters. She led 2,000. The Zorath had responded by increasing patrols and tightening security. They built checkpoints on every major road. They installed scanners that could detect human biosigns. They executed suspected resistance members in public squares. None of it worked. Derek Liu had become a ghost in the machine. He lived inside the Zorath computer systems, watching everything, knowing everything. When the aliens planned a raid on a resistance hideout, Derek made sure the hideout was empty hours before they arrived. When they set traps, Derek guided the fighters around them. "They're getting frustrated," Derek reported during a strategy meeting. "I intercepted a message from their local commander to General Vexer. He is requesting 10,000 additional troops." Katie smiled grimly. "Good. Every soldier they send here is one less soldier defending their supply lines." Nathan Cole spread a map across the table. It showed the Zorath Command Center, a heavily fortified building in the center of the city. "I have been studying their security patterns," Nathan said. "The building is impossible to attack directly. 2,000 guards, energy shields, automated weapons on every corner. We would lose everyone before we got through the front door." "So we do not go through the front door," Katie replied. She pointed at a spot on the map 2 blocks from the command center. "This is a water treatment plant. It is connected to the same underground pipe system that supplies the command center. Nathan's eyes widened. You want to poison their water? Better. I want to use those pipes to deliver a package. The package was one of Dr. Lisa Martinez's paralysis canisters, modified by Derek to release its contents through the building's ventilation system. Getting it into the water pipes required digging through 40 feet of concrete. Getting it to the right location required Nathan to calculate water flow rates for 3 days straight. But on the 15th day of the occupation, at exactly 3 in the afternoon, every Zorth soldier inside the command center collapsed. Katie's fighters stormed the building 5 minutes later. They captured the local commander, seized communication equipment, and downloaded every file in the main computer. Then they vanished back into the tunnels before reinforcements could arrive. The commander was interrogated for 6 hours. He revealed patrol schedules, weapon locations, and the access codes for 3 other facilities. When he was no longer useful, he was left paralyzed in an abandoned building with a note attached to his chest. The note said, "There are more ways to fight than you know." General Vexer received news of the incident while planning his assault on Earth. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. How? He demanded. How are they doing this? They have no army. They have no fleet. They are just civilians. His officers had no answer. The Zorth had conquered species with advanced technology and powerful militaries. They had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy where every individual seemed capable of independent tactical thinking. An enemy that treated rules as suggestions and honor as weakness. On the USS Valiant, Commander Daniel Harris received the same news with a different reaction. He laughed, a genuine sound of joy that surprised his crew. They captured a Zorth commander, he said. A month ago, we were wondering if we could survive the week. Now we are taking prisoners. Amy Lawson looked up from her navigation console. Sir, we just received word from the Megan Powell squadron. They destroyed 3 more supply ships near Mars. And Ryan's modifications? Ryan Peters answered from the engineering section. The micromissile system is ready for testing. I am not promising it will work, but I am not promising it will not work either. Daniel nodded. This was always how it went with Ryan. Half his inventions were brilliant. The other half exploded. The trick was figuring out which was which before someone got hurt. Test it on the next target of opportunity, Daniel ordered, and start training other ships to use the system. If it works, I want every vessel in the fleet equipped within the week. The test came 2 days later when a Zorth patrol ship wandered too close to the Valiant's position. Ryan's system fired 8,000 micromissiles in a single burst. The Zorth shields blocked nothing. The patrol ship became a cloud of debris in less than 3 seconds. Ryan stared at the view screen in shock. That was better than expected. Daniel clapped him on the shoulder. Get the specifications to every ship in the fleet. And Ryan? Yes, sir. Maybe get some sleep. You look terrible. Ryan laughed, but he did not argue. He had been awake for 4 days straight. Even his coffee had started tasting like engineering grease dot as the Valiant moved to rejoin the fleet. Daniel allowed himself a moment of quiet hope. They were still outnumbered. They were still outgunned. But they were no longer helpless. The Zorth were learning that humans did not fight fair. More importantly, humans did not stop fighting. Ever. This war was far from over. General Vexer demanded a second conversation with the human commander. This time, his tone was different. Your tactics are dishonorable, Vexer growled through the view screen. His red eyes burned with anger, but something else lurked behind that anger. Something that looked almost like fear. Commander Daniel Harris stood calmly on the bridge of the Valiant. He had not slept properly in 3 weeks. His uniform hung loose on his frame because he had forgotten to eat regular meals. But his voice was steady when he replied, There is no honor in war. There is only survival. You hide in shadows. You strike without warning. You use poison and tricks instead of facing us in proper combat. Vexor's mandibles clicked furiously. This is the behavior of cowards. This is the behavior of survivors, Daniel corrected. Tell me, General, how many soldiers have you lost this month? Vexor did not answer. The number was much higher than he had expected. Much higher than it should have been. Daniel continued. Your empire has been fighting the same way for centuries. Army against army. Fleet against fleet. You perfected that style of warfare. You became the best at it. He paused. But we do not play that game. We make our own rules. I still have 800,000 soldiers, Vexor said through clenched teeth. And I still have 800,000 ways to stop them. The transmission ended. Vexor sat alone on his flagship, staring at reports that made no sense to him. His forces were still winning by every traditional measure. They held more territory. They had more ships. They had more guns, but they were bleeding. Slowly, constantly, bleeding from wounds they could not see coming. On Earth, humanity had transformed itself. The war had done something no peacetime leader had ever managed. It had united the planet. Nations that had fought each other for generations now shared intelligence freely. American engineers worked alongside Chinese scientists. Russian hackers collaborated with Japanese programmers. African farmers taught South American rebels how to make explosives from common chemicals. Corporations that had always put profit first converted their factories to weapons production without demanding payment. The head of the largest technology company in the world personally delivered new encryption codes to resistance. Fighters on Mars, a billionaire who had spent decades avoiding taxes, donated his entire fortune to build medical supplies. For the fleet, even criminals joined the cause. A notorious smuggler used her network to move weapons past Zorath checkpoints. A former terrorist became the most effective resistance trainer on 3 continents. A convicted murderer died defending a school full of children from alien soldiers. Dr. Lisa Martinez worked 20-hour days in her laboratory. Her paralysis compound had been just the beginning. Now she had created a dozen different biological agents, each targeting a different Zorath weakness. One compound disrupted their digestive systems, making it impossible for them to process food. Another affected their sleep cycles, causing hallucinations after 3 days. A third caused their skin to become hypersensitive, making their own armor painful to wear. I became a doctor to help people, Lisa told Daniel during one of his rare visits to her lab. I never thought I would spend my career finding new ways to hurt living creatures. Daniel understood her pain. He felt it himself every day. What we are doing is terrible. But what happens if we lose is worse. The Zorath do not take prisoners. They do not accept surrender. They end species. Lisa nodded slowly. I know. That is why I keep working. But I want you to promise me something, Commander. What? When this is over, if we survive, promise me we will never become like them. Promise me we will remember that mercy is not weakness. Daniel took her hand. I promise. In space, the human fleet had become a nightmare for Zorath commanders. 47 ships had somehow destroyed or damaged over 200 enemy vessels. They appeared without warning, struck with devastating precision, and vanished before retaliation was possible. Ryan Peters had outdone himself. His micromissile system was now standard equipment on every human ship. But that was not his only contribution. I figured out how to make us invisible, he announced during a command meeting. Captain Megan Powell raised an eyebrow. Invisible? Well, almost invisible. Ryan pulled up a technical diagram on the display. Zorath sensors work by detecting energy signatures. Our ships give off heat, radiation, electromagnetic pulses. Their sensors pick all of that up. We know this, Daniel said. That is why we use asteroids and debris fields for cover. Right, but what if we did not need cover? Ryan pointed at his diagram. I developed a coating that absorbs and redirects energy emissions. A ship covered in this coating looks like empty space on Zora's sensors. They cannot see us unless they are close enough to use visual observation. The implications were staggering. Ships that could not be detected could strike anywhere, anytime. The Zorath would never know where the next attack was coming from. How long to coat the entire fleet? Daniel asked. 2 weeks if we work around the clock. You have 1 week. Make it happen. On Haven Prime, the Resistance had achieved something remarkable. For the first time since the invasion began, they controlled more territory than the Zorath. Katie Morrison had transformed from a grieving widow into a legendary commander. Stories about her spread across the occupied colonies. They said she could walk through walls. They said she knew what the Zorath would do before they did it. They said she had never lost a single fighter under her command. None of these stories were completely true, but all of them contained some truth. Katie's success came from one simple principle. The Zorath did not understand humans. They did not understand that a teacher could become a soldier. They did not understand that civilians would choose death over surrender. They did not understand that humans fought hardest when they had nothing left to lose. We are planning something big, Katie told her inner circle during a secret meeting. The largest coordinated uprising in human history. Derek Liu displayed a map showing all the occupied colonies. Red dots marked resistance cells on each world. There were hundreds of them. On the same day, at the same hour, every resistance group in the system will attack simultaneously, Katie explained. Not supply depots. Not communication centers. This time, we hit their garrisons directly. Nathan Cole studied the map with concern. That is dangerous. We will take heavy casualties. Yes, Katie admitted. We will, but we will also prove something. We will prove that no matter how many soldiers they have, they cannot hold us down. They cannot break us. They cannot make us stop fighting. The attack was scheduled for the anniversary of the first invasion. A symbolic choice. A message to both humans and Zorath. On that day, 50,000 civilians armed with improvised weapons rose up across 6 worlds. They attacked garrisons, freed prisoners, seized communication towers, and raised human flags over buildings that had been under alien control for months. The Zorath fought back with brutal efficiency. They killed thousands. They burned entire neighborhoods. They executed anyone suspected of helping the resistance. But when the smoke cleared, the humans were still standing, battered, bloody, but unbroken. General Vexer received casualty reports that made his staff afraid to speak. Over 60,000 Zorath soldiers dead in a single day. Not from military forces, from civilians, from farmers and teachers and shopkeepers. For the first time in his career, Vexer began to doubt himself. His million soldiers were still fighting. But how many more would he lose before this war ended? On the Valiant, Daniel Harris watched recordings of the uprising. He saw humans charge into certain death without hesitation. He saw children throwing rocks at armored soldiers. He saw an old woman detonate herself in the middle of a Zorath patrol. Taking 12 aliens with her tears ran down his face. He did not try to hide them. Are we winning? Amy Lawson asked quietly. Daniel took a long moment to answer. I do not know if we are winning, but I know we are not losing. And against an enemy like this, that might be enough. The Zorath fleet was 1 week from Earth. The final battle was coming. Humanity would be ready. The final battle for Earth began on a Tuesday morning. General Vexer had committed everything to this assault. 312 warships, carrying his remaining 800,000 soldiers. He would crush the human fleet, bombard their cities from orbit, and land his armies on every continent simultaneously. There would be no mercy. There would be no prisoners. This species had humiliated him for too long. Now they would pay. Commander Daniel Harris watched the Zorath fleet approach from the bridge of the Valiant. His ship looked nothing like it had 3 months ago. Ryan Peters had transformed it into something that barely qualified as a functioning vessel. Extra weapons bristled from every surface. The hull was covered in the invisible coating. The engines had been modified to run at dangerous levels. All ships report ready, Amy Lawson announced from her station. 47 human ships against 312. Impossible odds again. Remember the plan, Daniel said over the fleet communication channel. We do not need to destroy them. We just need to hurt them badly enough that landing on Earth becomes too costly. Make them bleed. Make them doubt. Make them fear. Captain Megan Powell's voice came through the speakers. Sir, we just received a message from the surface. Every resistance group on every colony is launching simultaneous attacks. The Zorath will have to split their attention between space and ground operations. Daniel smiled. Katie Morrison had timed it perfectly. Even now, thousands of civilians were rising up behind enemy lines, forcing the Zorath to defend against threats from every direction. All ships, Daniel commanded. Engage at will. The human fleet scattered like seeds in the wind. Instead of forming battle lines, they broke into small groups and dove straight into the Zorath formation. The aliens tried to target them, but Ryan's coding made the human ships nearly impossible to track. Megan Powell led her squadron through the heart of the enemy fleet. Her pilots were the best humanity had to offer, trained not in military academies, but in civilian flight schools and video game tournaments. They flew like they had nothing to lose, because they did not. Her squadron destroyed 15 Zorath ships in the first hour. They lost 4 of their own. The price was terrible, but the message was clear. Humans could hurt them. Humans could kill them. On the Valiant, Ryan Peters fired the first full volley of micro-missiles in fleet combat. 20,000 tiny projectiles streaked through space, too small for Zorath shields to detect. 3 enemy warships exploded almost simultaneously. It works, Ryan breathed. It actually works. Keep firing, Daniel ordered. Do not let them recover. The battle raged for hours. Human ships darted between larger Zorath vessels, striking weak points and vanishing before retaliation could follow. The invisible coating made targeting almost impossible. Every time the aliens thought they had cornered a human ship, it would simply disappear from their sensors. But the Zorath had numbers. For every ship they lost, they could afford to lose 10 more. Human ships began falling. First 2, then 5, then a dozen. Lieutenant Derek Liu died when his ship was caught between 3 Zorath warships. He fought until the last moment, taking one of them with him. Nicole Adams, Ryan's assistant, was killed when a direct hit breached the Valiant's engineering section. She had been sealing a hull breach when the explosion came. Ryan found her body still holding the repair tool she had been using. The losses mounted. 16 ships, 18, 20. Amy Lawson looked up from her console, her face pale. Sir, we cannot keep this up. At this rate, we will lose the entire fleet within 2 hours. Daniel knew she was right. They had done incredible damage, but it was not enough. The Zorath were still coming. Their flagship was still broadcasting commands. Their army was still preparing to land. Then Katie Morrison's voice cut through the communication channel. She was broadcasting from Haven Prime, but her message reached every human in the solar system. This is Katie Morrison. I need every hacker, every programmer, every person who knows anything about computers to listen carefully. Derek Liu's team had done something incredible before they died. They had cracked the master encryption for the entire Zorath command network. The codes were now being broadcast to every resistance group, every surviving ship, every human with access to a terminal. Use these codes, Katie continued. Get into their systems. Shut down everything you can. Do it now. Across the solar system, thousands of humans went to work. They were not soldiers. They were not hackers. They were students and accountants and retired engineers. But they had the codes, and they had instructions. On the Zorath flagship, alarms began sounding. Navigation systems crashed. Weapons targeting failed. Communication channels filled with static. General Vexer watched in disbelief as his carefully coordinated fleet fell into chaos. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation began drifting out of position. Weapons that had been tracking human targets suddenly aimed at empty space. What is happening? He demanded. His officers had no answer. The humans were inside their systems. Not in one place, but everywhere. Thousands of attacks from thousands of sources, all using the same access codes. Daniel Harris saw the opportunity and seized it. All ships, concentrate fire on the flagship. Everything you have, now. The remaining human vessels converged on Vexer's command ship. Missiles streaked through space. Energy weapons carved through armor. Micro-projectiles found gaps in shields that should have been impenetrable. The flagship shuddered under the assault. One engine exploded. Then another. The great ship began to list to one side, flames erupting from dozens of breaches. "Sir," Ryan reported, "the flagship's weapons are offline. Their shields are failing. They are dead in space." "Prepare boarding parties," Daniel commanded. Brandon Taylor led the assault team. He had started this war as a mechanic. Now, he was one of the most experienced combat veterans in the human resistance. His team cut through the flagship's hull and fought their way through corridors filled with smoke and sparks. The Zorath soldiers fought hard. They were bred for war, designed to be perfect killing machines. But they were also confused, their communications down, their commanders unable to give orders. Brandon's team found Vexer on the command deck. The general was standing alone, his staff dead around him, his ship dying beneath his feet. He still held his ceremonial blade, the weapon he had used to execute enemy commanders for centuries. "Come then, human," Vexer said. "Face me properly." Warrior to warrior. Brandon considered for a moment. Then he raised his rifle and shot the general in his third arm joint, exactly where the armor was weak. Vexer collapsed, paralyzed by the same compound that Dr. Lisa Martinez had created months ago. Brandon stood over him, weapon still raised. "There is no proper combat," Brandon said, echoing words he had heard from Commander Harris. "There is only survival." The battle ended not with a dramatic explosion, but with the quiet sound of Zorath surrender signals broadcasting across the fleet. Without their flagship, without their general, without functioning communications, the alien armada had no choice but to stop fighting. 23 human ships had been destroyed. Thousands of people had died. The Valiant itself had lost half its crew, including Amy Lawson, who had died holding a breach in the hull long enough for emergency seals to activate. But humanity had won. Daniel Harris faced his defeated enemy one final time in the brig of the Valiant. Vexer sat in chains, his armor stripped away. Without it, he looked smaller, diminished, almost ordinary. "How?" the general asked. "You were outnumbered, outgunned. You should have fallen like all the others." Daniel thought about all the people who had made this victory possible. Katie Morrison, who had organized a rebellion with nothing but determination and grief. Ryan Peters, who had built impossible weapons in impossible time frames. Derek Liu, who had given his life to crack the codes that turned the tide. Amy Lawson, who had died so others could live. "You counted our soldiers," Daniel finally answered. "You measured our weapons. You calculated our resources. But you never understood what makes us dangerous. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. We do not fight because we expect to win. We fight because giving up was never an option. Every human you faced carried a million ideas, a million strategies, a million reasons to keep going. He looked back at the defeated general. You brought a million soldiers to a war against a million stubborn, creative, unreasonable minds. Vexer said nothing. There was nothing to say. The Zorath Dominion would eventually rebuild their forces. They might even seek revenge someday. But they would never again underestimate the species that had taught them the true cost of war. And across the galaxy, other civilizations took notice. The humans had survived the impossible. They had faced extinction and refused to accept it. They had fought not with superior technology or greater numbers, but with something far more dangerous. They had fought with the absolute refusal to quit. 6 months later, Daniel Harris stood on a balcony overlooking a rebuilt city. Earth was healing. The colonies were free. A new human fleet was being constructed, not for conquest, but for defense. Katie Morrison stood beside him. She had finally left the resistance tunnels and returned to the sunlight. The war had changed her. It had changed everyone. But she was still standing, still fighting, still human. Do you think they will come back? She asked.